And he has a substantial party. He has a substantial political infrastructure. He has been the government until resignation. So he has the network, the infrastructure, and I'm not sure anyone in this country believed that he might have to go home 2 years before the next election. And I'm sure he himself would have believed, and the entire political spectrum of this country probably would have believed, that this man would be re-elected even in 2013. He appeared to be so powerful. He had a large majority, he had a substantial majority in parliament, and he has a huge party. He is the government, and he has already started his campaign, and the political rhetoric has been all aimed at the next election. The opposition parties are not so united in one common stand. There are several candidates who probably would come, and all factors given, there's every likelihood that he might have believed that he would have even secured the next election. So you're looking at a man who would have had 2 terms at least in office, and he would never have expected to go home, not before the next election at least. So for him to cut short his 10-year rule and then go home in 3 years, and then to go home not after defeat in an election, but because he lost the support and faith and loyalty of his troops, is a very sad gesture, is a very sad awakening for him. And naturally he will be agitated to release all that power, to relinquish all that power, and to suffer defeat in that manner cannot be accepted, and cannot be accepted easily. For a politician even to accept defeat in an election is difficult. And for him as a national leader to go home in such disrepute will be even worse. So you must understand his agitation, his difficulty in accepting the terms of his resignation, the conditions of his resignation, or the circumstances in which he had to go home, and for the abrupt end to his rule in the country. All of this will be translated into vengeance. All of this will be translated into retaliation. All of this will question the legitimacy of a succeeding government. This is what is happening now. I mean, it was expected that this was going to happen.
The newly appointed Home Minister, Dr. Jamil, he had openly said that the people who were responsible for yesterday's violence, inciting violence across the country, would be brought before justice. And while MDP majority is still at Parliament, if I'm wrong, it is MDP majority is still at Parliament, and with them accusing the police of brutality, do you think that the newly appointed cabinet would have any chance when it goes for a vote at Parliament?
I think it's a misnomer or a misleading fact to say that MDP has a majority in Parliament. No. As one party, they control the largest number of seats. They have 34 registered seats. And there are independents who lean consistently with them. That probably will give them 3 more seats. So their numbers at max would be at 37. This is a 77-member parliament. So I believe there would still be 41 votes against 37 votes. And if all the opposition and the rest of the independents are united in their support for this government, I'm sure the cabinet nominations wouldn't fail.
Well, many say that the opposition was united only against the Nasheed administration, and many doubt that they would remain united throughout the process of establishing the new government. You are also an independent member of Parliament who joined the opposition's efforts against the illegal acts of the government. What do you have to say about this?
I didn't first join the opposition against the illegal acts. I took the side of the Constitution, and I appeared in their rally only because I was in favor of the Constitution. And I don't think none of the political parties would have known that I would be going there, because it was a sudden and impulsive decision only known to myself until I appeared there. That said, I believe that each of the the political dynamics have changed. It has shifted dramatically since President Nasheed's resignation. They were united against President Nasheed's government, and they would have probably kept that unity even to the next election, so that they could have a common opposition candidate tackle President Nasheed in a contest. Yet, that has changed. And I believe they will still be united in their support for the continuation of this government that had come yesterday. Yet, they would probably be standing elections themselves. Like each of those parties would want to now field their candidates. And they would all be focusing now on the 2013 elections, each by themselves. I think that coalition, the purpose for the coalition has disappeared. The purpose was to unite against and bring out a common candidate to contest elections against Nasheed. That has gone now. So probably it's very likely that we would see the disintegration of that coalition so far as the next 2013 election is concerned. But you can expect them to be united in their support for this current government, because I don't think it would be in their interest to see this government not succeed. It has to succeed, especially because we are in a presidential form of government and our elections are specific and it is not dependent on the dissolution of the parliament. It can only happen on the concurrent resignation of the vice president and the vice president. At the moment, we don't have a vice president. So the president's resignation could initiate an election. But if he's determined to remain in power, because by constitution, a vice president who takes over from an existing president would be entitled to remain for the remainder of the term of that government. So that means he still has time until 2013, November 10th. So it is totally up to this president to remain, and he has to now nominate a vice presidential candidate, send to parliament, get it endorsed from parliament, appoint that vice president. If that vice president is appointed, then an election cannot happen on the resignation of vice president alone, because automatically again the vice president will be promoted to the position of the president, like it happened yesterday in this country. So both of them must concurrently resign and hand over power to the Speaker of Parliament. And then the Speaker of Parliament will call elections within a 60-day period. That is how the chain, the hierarchy of power is arranged in this country by constitution. So I don't expect the opposition to withdraw support for this government and call early elections. I don't expect that happening.
What if the now opposition, the former MDP administration, what if they plan to overthrow the government? I mean, depending on the strength of the crowds that, we saw the strength of the crowds that came out in support of former President Nasheed. Do you think that they might attempt to stage a coup or overthrow the Wahid administration?
In all fairness to President Nasheed, I also believe that a government cannot be overthrown except by ballot. It cannot be done on the streets. And I still believe that. Despite what happened day before yesterday, I still believe that. Now, I would, contrary to popular opinion, I would still disagree that President Nasheed's government was overthrown by a mob or protesters or on the streets. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that at all. I think he had to resign because he lost the pledge of allegiance from the armed forces and the police service, which are two very critical factors for him, to remain in power. And that he lost. And that was the reason why he resigned. Protests have been going on for 21 days already, and there have been more violent protests in this country in the last 7 years. You must have seen there were much bigger protests, more violent protests, more serious protests, but nothing affected the government. And I believe that had President Nasheed enjoyed the confidence and loyalty of his armed forces and the police service, he would still have remained in power. And the protests per se, by themselves alone, would not have an impact on the government. That way, I believe a mob cannot overthrow a president in this country. A protest cannot overthrow a president in this country. It has to be other factors. Day before yesterday was a combination of several factors. I think the key immediate factor is constantly subjecting the military and the police to the brink of tolerance. I mean, They just got tired, they got exhausted, and they were faced with a ruler who was asking them to comply with unlawful or unconstitutional orders, and they knew that. They knew that. And there was a time, there was a limit they could go, and on Tuesday by 1 p.m., that limit had come.
Going back to yesterday's events, we saw MDP activists burn down courthouses, police offices in islands, and even many private and public property was damaged in the capital itself. As a legal professional, what actions do you think would be or could be taken against them?
Oh, naturally, vandalism is a criminal offense in this country, and terrorism is an offense in this country. They can be prosecuted for the acts that they have committed. Whether the government or the prosecutor general would want to go for selective prosecution of serious offenders alone, or only selective instances, that's all up to an independent institution called the prosecutor general himself, And as far as the government or the Home Ministry or the Maldives police concerned, for them, these people, by burning down courthouses, by burning down court documents, by harming property, they have, or by threatening people, they have committed a serious criminal offense. And all of that has to be investigated and submitted for prosecution. It's all up to the prosecutor to decide which statutes to cite, which sections to pick, or which crimes to prosecute for.
As the Vice President of the Nasheed administration, we saw Dr. Wahid as a silent man but with strong opinions. But Nasheed has already slammed him in international media, calling him someone who has always had designs on the crown. In your opinion, can Dr. Wahid lead the country into a more peaceful time? Can he handle the situation?
Two things again. A vice president is always there to take up the crown. There is no need for a vice president to be elected with the president unless he is ready to take up the position of the president. It's not only because of Wahid. That's the system we have developed for ourselves. We have a twin executive system, meaning to say that we elect twins. One as president, the other as vice president. Vice president is by constitution required to take over the president's job once the president becomes incapacitated permanently, or he resigns, or even during times where he is temporarily prevented from discharging the functions of his office. So our vice president is there to assume the presidency in case at the time it is needed to do so. That is how we have developed the system. Then the other issue, whether he could wade through the times and whether he could deliver us safely to the next elections, I would like to give him the benefit of doubt. I personally don't know the gentleman. I have only had very few conversations with him. I have only admired him on television. I know he has a decorated track record in international civil service, but I have not seen him in action. So like any other Maldivian, I would like to wait and see, and even go to the extent of offering any support I can in helping him run his administration in the areas that I'm familiar with, law and constitution perhaps, But I would like to wait and see, and I would like to give him the benefit of doubt, and I would like to give him the space for his administration to succeed. And I would want to support him in Parliament so long as rule of law is upheld and the constitution prevails.
We now bring you a report looking back at the events that led to the former President Mohamed Nasheed's resignation. Take a look. The activities led by 23rd December Alliance for 22 consecutive nights ended unexpectedly. The protests, which began at the MMA area, ended at Artificial Beach. When MMA grounds were closed, protesters moved to the fish market area and the streets of Male. Protests took a turn for the worse when the protesters started gathering at the Artificial Beach area. Since then, every night, MDP activists gathered at the area and tried to counter the peaceful protests. The protests, which were being held to oppose the unlawful arrest and detention of Criminal Court Chief Judge Abdullah Muhammad on the orders of former President Mohamed Nasheed, ended in the most unexpected manner. Like other nights, on the 6th,